Under Pope Benedict, relations between traditional Catholics and the Vatican were friendly. Under Pope Francis, they were openly hostile. What is the state of that relationship under Pope Leo? So today I want to talk about the relationship between traditional Catholics and the Vatican, basically the state of traditionalism under Pope Leo. Now, the truth is, over the past, well, ever since Vatican II, really, it's been quite a roller coaster when it comes to that relationship. I think under Paul VI, probably the number one thing that was true about the relationship was shock from the traditionalist side. I mean, they didn't change any. And all of a sudden now they have this difficult relationship with the Pope. And I think they didn't really know what to do with that. All of a sudden, all these things are being implemented that are new, they're removing so many of the traditions of the church. And Paul VI seems to be completely fine with it. And so, first of all, a lot of traditionalists went underground. A lot of traditional Catholics, honestly, they just stopped being traditional Catholics in a sense. It's kind of hard to explain, but like my father-in-law, for example, I don't think he never would call himself a traditional Catholic. But growing up, he loved the old mass. And when they changed the mass, he didn't like it. He didn't go on a campaign. He didn't do anything like that. He just simply didn't like it. And so he tried to go to the most traditional parish nearby. If all of a sudden his parish started went to the new mass, this is before the official, everybody going to new mass in 1970. If they started doing new stuff, he'd just go to another parish that didn't. Finally, though, it's like there was nothing available. And he didn't know that there was any other options. So he just started going to Novus Ordo, never really liked it, but just kind of accepted that. And I think that's what happened to most people, most Catholics who stayed in the church, who didn't leave. But under Vatican II, the people who consider themselves traditional Catholics, they really had a very difficult relationship with him. They had to go underground. Of course, that's when the Society of St. Pius X began with Archbishop Lefebvre. And so it was a difficult time to be a traditional Catholic. Then under JP2, obviously JP1 was only there for a month. Under JP2, it was a rocky relationship between traditional Catholics and Pope John Paul II. On the one hand, John Paul was definitely more orthodox in his proclamation than Paul VI. He was more conservative, I think is probably a better term. And so he's more friendly in some ways, but yet this is also a time when he did the prayer meeting in Assisi in 1986, which scandalized basically all traditional Catholics, especially Archbishop Lefebvre and the Society. This is when Archbishop Lefebvre consecrated the bishops without permission and was excommunicated by John Paul II. And really, but yet also, this is the time, this is the Pope, John Paul II. He established the Fraternity of St. Peter in response. He opened up the celebration of the Latin Mass. I mean, under Paul VI, it basically was de facto that you were not allowed to celebrate the traditional Latin Mass. And then under JP2, it was broadened. More people were allowed. It took a while, but more people were allowed. More priests were allowed to say the Latin Mass. There weren't as many rules. So that's under John Paul II. Then you have Benedict XVI. Now, this is the best of all the post-Vatican II popes as far as his relationship with traditionalists. He lifted the excommunications of the Society of St. Pius X bishops. He issued Summorum Pontificum, which really liberalized how much the Latin Mass could be said. And he generally, though, was much more traditional leaning than JP2 and Paul VI. Now, it's very important, though, he was not a traditionalist. I mean, he definitely had a Vatican II kind of mindset, Benedict the 16th did. But there's no question that things were looking up for traditionalists under Benedict XVI, that most traditionalists welcomed him and were very happy under him because he allowed, like I said, the proliferation of the Latin Mass. And he just seemed to be very comfortable with the idea of the traditional Latin Mass being said in more places and really traditionalists having a seat at the table, so to speak, in the church. Then, of course, we have Pope Francis. In 2013, he becomes the Pope. And I mean, I don't know how else you can say it, but there is an all out war now between traditionalists and the Pope, between traditional Catholics and the Vatican. I mean, it was very clear Pope Francis hated traditionalists. He considered them the enemy. He thought they were the real problem in the church. And honestly, the feeling became mutual that most traditionalists felt the same about him that he felt about them. That really there was an animosity and, let's be honest, a hatred between the two, between the Vatican, between Pope Francis and traditionalists. I'm not saying this was a good thing. I'm not saying it was. I'm not even saying whose fault it was. I'm just simply saying that was the reality. That there was open warfare now between traditional Catholics and the papacy and the pontificate of Francis. Now, I go through this little quick history for a reason, because it's, like I said, it's been a roller coaster for traditional Catholics in their relationship with the Vatican over the past 50 years. This is not good. This is not the way it should be. Popes should not have, new popes should not radically have different agendas than the previous pope. The whole point of a papacy, of the pope, is to basically receive what's been handed on to you and then transmit it to the next generation. They're supposed to be the steady hand. On the bark of St. Peter, the Pope is supposed to be a steady hand. There shouldn't be these wild shifts from one Pope to another. It shouldn't really be a situation where you don't know when a Pope is elected, okay, what's he going to think about important issues? It should just be like, he's going to think about the same thing everybody else thinks about it. Every other Pope has thought about it, but that's not the way it is. And so, honestly, I just think that we need to recognize Catholics who blame traditionalists for our poor relationship with the Vatican. Honestly, I think that's very unfair, because traditionalists don't even know what they're getting with the next pope. They're like, okay, are we allowed to do this? Or are we allowed to do that? Or can we believe this and practice this? Or is it going to be condemned by the Vatican? We don't even know what to expect. And this is exactly what happened when Pope Leo was elected last May. Everybody was speculating, what's it mean? All traditionalists were speculating, what's it mean for the traditional Latin Mass, for traditionalism in general? Because we just didn't know. Now, of course, the speculation has some info, it's not just total guesswork, I guess what I'm trying to say. We know we knew stuff about the history of Robert Prevost, and so we could make some guesses. But the point is, it shouldn't even be a case where people are wondering about basic things like, can we say this mass or not, based upon who the Pope is? Can we embrace and publicly embrace these practices? Are we going to have to hide our bulletin announcements about masses that have been said, like mass has been said for thousands of years? It's crazy. We just simply don't know what to expect. We don't know what to expect with each pope. And so I think I just want to lay that out there, when I talk about the current relationship between the papacy and traditional Catholics, that it really has been a difficult time, and it's been a roller coaster, like I've said already. So what is going on under Pope Leo? So we've seen this history, this up and down. Probably the high point was Pope Benedict, the low point was Francis. JP2 was probably better than Francis, and probably better than Paul VI. Paul VI was probably better than Francis, and not as good as Benedict. I mean, all this craziness. So what about under Pope Leo? What I want to do is I want to talk about, first of all, just kind of how some prominent American traditionalists, well, Kennedy Hall's thrown in there too, and he's Canadian, but we kind of consider him a honorary American, although he probably doesn't want to be considered honorary American. But the point is how have they reacted to the pontificate of Pope Leo, and then talk about what Pope Leo's done on his end. Now, first, I just want to start with myself and with Crisis Magazine. I don't claim to be a number one traditionalist, like a leader, a traditional movement. In fact, a lot of traditionalists kind of consider me not fully traditionalist. Like I'm more of a semi-trad, whatever. But just kind of my own, what I've done, my reaction. I was kind of going through the Crisis website since Leo has been, how many articles were tagged Pope Leo the 14th, and I found there's been 24 since he was elected, and of course a lot were very early on, and they've been mostly neutral to positive. There's been very few that have been critical, really critical of Pope Leo. Now, this is in contrast to under Pope Francis. There were 383 articles tagged Pope Francis, but to be honest, that's about the same rate as Leo because it's about 31 a year. And if there's been 24 for Leo and he hasn't been there a year, so it's not like we're writing about Pope Leo more or less at Crisis, but there's no question the tone has changed. I mean, I would be lying if I tried, and nobody believed me if I acted like it didn't. I mean, I started in 2001 at Crisis, and there's no question. If you look at the articles that refer to Pope Francis during my time, they have been mostly negative. Not all negative, but mostly negative. I myself wrote a few positive things about him, whereas under Pope Leo, it's been much different tone, a much different tone. And I did have a podcast last October about Pope Leo being disappointed in Pope Leo. I think it was just called Disappointed in Pope Leo or something like that. And it's one of my most popular podcast episodes from 2025, which I think is interesting. And I think this is something we all know that negativity sells better than positivity when it comes to clicks on the internet. And so that's probably not that surprising. It actually was even more popular. It had more views than my video I did the day of the election when I was with Tim Flanders and Kennedy Hall talking about his election, which of course was a pretty popular podcast because he had just been elected. I'm actually going to have an article later this week that I wrote that's critical of Pope Leo about something. So it's not that we're like at Crisis, we refuse to criticize Pope Leo. We just simply are not doing it anywhere near as often as we did with Francis. And I think personally that's warranted. I think, first of all, he's early on. You give him benefit of the doubt. Secondly, he hasn't done the things that Pope Francis did. So overall, though, I'd say at Crisis, we've had a wait and see approach, give him the benefit of the doubt, have a generally positive outlook about him, and not bring every single thing up that he does that we don't agree with. So how about other prominent traditionalists? So let me just look at our sister publication, 1 Peter 5, Tim Flanders. Note, of course, we are sister publications. So I'm talking about kind of in-house here still. But over there, Tim Flanders, I think he's even been less critical than I have been about Pope Leo. He's been mostly focused on, at 1 Peter 5, building up traditional Catholic culture and helping people live traditional Catholic lives, and less about, okay, what did Pope Leo do this week or that week? And generally, when you hear Tim talk, like on my podcast or on his own and other places, excuse me, he's been relatively positive about Pope Leo and about his own thoughts. And I think he's had a very similar approach to mine when it comes to that. And it's not that surprising because Tim and I see things very similarly. We joke about this when we talk that we didn't know when he took over 1 Peter 5 and we were going to be working together. We didn't actually know at that time how much we were compatible in our thought and the way we looked at things and how we did things. But anyway, so 1 Peter 5 has been relatively positive as well. How about Pelican Plus, which Tim Flanders is also associated with, but we have Peter Kwasniewski, we have Kennedy Hall, and some others over at Pelican Plus. Well, I feel like that's been similar to Crisis in 1 Peter 5 in that it's been critical of Leo at times, but generally it's talking about other things. It too is talking about how to build up traditional Catholic life, how to live as a Catholic. I mean, there's been stuff like Peter Kwasniewski, Kennedy Hall have written articles that clearly were more negative towards Pope Leo and podcasts and things of that nature. But that's not been the focus. I mean, you know what I'm talking about. In the Francis days, 1 Peter 5, for example, under Steve Skocek, Crisis Magazine under me, Kennedy Hall's podcast, Taylor Marshall, who I'll talk to about in a second, his podcast. There was a real theme, LifeSiteNews. There was a real theme of let's just see how bad, let's compete to see who can say how bad Pope Francis is. I mean, that's kind of what had occurred. And again, I'm not blaming my friends, and they're all my friends, these people I've mentioned so far. And I have great respect for all of them. Or myself even, I'm not I'm a little harder on myself, to be honest. I think I was a little too harsh at times about Pope Francis and said some things I didn't need to say. I'm not saying that about other people though. But the point is that was kind of what we all ended up with. And I think we all felt it was necessary because we have a pope who's doing such a terrible job under Pope Francis that we felt like we need to help Catholics to understand that, to live under that, navigate that crisis. And I still think that when I'm hard on myself for things I said in the past about Pope Francis, don't get me wrong. I'm not all of a sudden becoming a Pope splainer and act like Francis was a good Pope. No, he was a terrible Pope. One of the worst we've ever had. I don't think he was the worst, but I do think he was probably top 10 worst. So I'm not saying that that's changed. I'm just saying the constant criticism. And so, Pelican Plus is definitely taking a much more positive route, just about relating to the faith, the traditional Catholic faith, with sometimes criticizing Pope Leo. I imagine when or if Pope Leo cracks down on the SSPX with their decision to consecrate new bishops, perhaps then we'll see much more critical stuff against Pope Leo. But how about Taylor Marshall? I mean, he had lots and lots of podcasts during the Francis pontificate that were critical of Pope Francis and saying all the things going wrong under him. And he's done that under Leo. Like, he probably talks about Leo more than anybody else I've mentioned so far, like myself or Tim or Peter Kwasniewski or Kennedy or anybody like that. And so he talks about him more, but that's kind of his podcast. That's his sweet spot. That's what he's there for, kind of, is to talk a lot of times about Vatican, what's going on at the Vatican. But I have noticed that Taylor's not got the same kind of it's not the same, I don't want to say the same attitude, but it's just a different feel, different tone than it was under Francis, where he's not maybe as quick to be as critical of Leo, and also he's giving him more of the benefit of the doubt. Probably for the same reasons I'm doing this. I'm doing the same thing. And then we have Michael Matt as well. I wanted to mention him over at the Remnant. Great guy. I think. I mean, I'm getting a little bit repetitive here, but I wanted to mention specifically some people before I talk about some others have a different viewpoint, a different way of approaching it. But Michael Matt, he's done the same thing. I feel like he's not constantly criticizing Leo. He's focused on other things. I mean, he's willing to criticize Leo. Don't get me wrong, but it's just not the same the repetitive nature of criticism like we had under Francis. That I think, honestly, here's the thing: not only having a new, do we want to give him a down? I think a lot of people, not just me, just simply tired of the constant repetitive nature of criticism. Every time he did, we have to he did this, did this to him. Oh, I stopped. August of 24. So in like about months or something before I died, just declared I'm not criticizing him anymore publicly, because I just felt like we know who he is. It doesn't really help any to continue to bring up everything he says that's wrong or dumb or heretical or whatever. So I feel like, so not only do we have a new pope, and so therefore we should have a different attitude, but we're also like, we're getting tired of this. So I think that's also part of the equation we're talking about there. So another thing I want to bring up though is some of the people who have had a different attitude about their approach to Pope Francis. And so I don't want to name a whole bunch of names because I'm being more critical. I don't like criticizing people, by name too much. But I will say, like, one person I just want to bring up is like Chris Jackson. Chris Jackson, he and I had a friendly relationship for a number of years. And he has definitely taken a different tack. Let's just say that. He's been extremely critical of Leo. He's constantly publishing things that are saying how terrible he is. He's Francis 2.0. Maybe he's worse than him. I mean, he really is obsessed with just reporting every single thing he thinks is wrong with Leo and constantly doing that. And the truth is, he lambasts everybody else I've just mentioned. He lumps us all as trad inc. It's the term he uses basically to say we're all sellouts, that we're not criticizing Leo. I'll be honest, I'm not 100% sure always. It's not always clear to me exactly what trad inc is. And he's not the only one who uses that term, but it basically is the idea that we all sold out, that people like Peter Kwasniewski, myself, Taylor Marshall, Tim Flanders, whatever, we all sold out. That's the ink part of it, I guess. And so that we wouldn't criticize Leo. I'm not quite sure why we sold out. Like, what was I didn't get any financial benefits. I didn't all of a sudden get asked to speak at any diocesan events, and I don't think any of those other men have either. I'm not exactly sure, but there's this conspiracy of silence supposedly among Trad Inc. Honestly, I just laugh. It's hard to take the accusation seriously because I know what's going on behind the scenes, which is nothing. Okay, so Tim Flanders, I work with Tim Flanders. I'm basically his boss because I'm over both Crisis Magazine and 1 Peter 5. I have never told him, like, okay, don't say anything critical about Pope Leo. I've never told him, hey, let's have a different tone with Leo. I said, this is he knows what I'm doing. And maybe that influenced him, but I don't think so because he had the same attitude as me. And it's not like I direct him. He runs 1 Peter 5. I talk to him maybe once a month or something like that about what's going on. Maybe not even that often. He might be like, no, Eric, I don't talk to you that much at all. The point is there wasn't even a conspiracy between two people who worked together under the same umbrella. So you're telling me there's a conspiracy among other people? Like, I talk to Taylor, sometimes text with them, but it's not that often. I talk to Peter Kwasniewski, Kennedy Hall, maybe a little bit more. I never talk to Michael Matt, not that there's any negative. We're not in that type of relationship. And so it's like, we don't talk that much about this stuff. And when we do, it's never a matter of, okay, here's our plan of attack, everybody. Let's have a united front. Taylor, you're going to say this, and Kennedy, you're going to say that, and Peter, you say this, and Eric, you say it. It's like, no, that's not how it works. We just each have our own views and we say what we think. That's essentially all it is. And here's the thing, though. It's true. We all sound pretty similar in our tone and our attitude towards Pope Leo. I don't think that's a conspiracy. I think that's just a bunch of people, and maybe this sounds a bit self-serving, a bit arrogant, but I think it's just a bunch of mature people who realize it's kind of silly to keep beating the exact same drum under Leo the second he takes the office. I just don't think there's any point to that. It just doesn't make much sense. But obviously, Chris Jackson disagrees. Another organization that I think has kind of kept the same way of doing things as under Pope Francis is LifeSiteNews. LifeSiteNews really under John Henry Weston, and John Henry Weston I think is a great guy. I don't talk to him ever. Again, I don't have that kind of relationship with him. I've met him and talked to him in the past. I've done an interview with him before. He comes across as a very holy and great guy. I only say he comes across that because I haven't been around him that much, but I was very impressed with him is all I'm trying to say. But I will say LifeSiteNews has not gone down the same path as Crisis Magazine on this. It has been much more critical. It has published articles by people who are very, very critical of Pope Leo. And so it's really taking a different, it's taking a different tack than the others. I just saw Anthony on the chat. Anthony, jump in the chat and tell me what you're doing. Because as you know, I don't actually listen to your podcast. So, so put up there though what you're doing, like how much you've been talking about Leo. I wish there was a way I could get you on here real quick, but I don't. I got to figure out how to do that sometime in the future to just get you to jump on, Anthony. But anyway, so if you want to jump on, oh my gosh, Avoiding Babylon. I forgot the name of your podcast, Anthony. I don't actually know what they're doing, so I should. I want to bring them up as well, though. The point is, though, LifeSiteNews is definitely going a different path than some of the others. They've kind of maintained the same type of reporting and a commentary as they did under Francis, and kind of seeing Leo as a continuation. So, okay, let me pop up what Anthony put here. We've actually taken the approach to not discuss anything in Rome at all. There's nothing we can do about it. So I've just been living my Catholic faith out. God bless you, Anthony. Okay, I might actually start listening to Avoiding Babylon now. I might not. But no. So Anthony also, Avoiding Babylon, and I recommend the podcast. I kid somewhat with him, but the point is like he's just Anthony's like, and I think that's part of what all of us are doing. It's not that we're saying, oh, Pope Leo is the great hope, traditional hope, and all of a sudden he's going to be this great pope or anything like that, and or he is. We're just simply not obsessing about what's happening there because, like Anthony said, we can't do that much about it. What's going on? So, but now let me turn it aside though, turn it around and look at what Pope Leo has done when it comes to traditionalists. Now, here's something I want to say that a lot of traditional Catholics will not like. And I was going to say this later, but I want to say it. This is a reality check. The Vatican doesn't care that much about traditionalists. It's just not that interested in traditional concerns. It's not a matter of it hating traditionalists like I think Francis did and maybe some people close to him did. I think it's a matter more of it's just simply not on the radar. The traditionalists are not on, they don't think about when they're deciding, okay, what are we going to do here? What are we going to do here? What's this concern? They're not thinking, oh, what will the traditionalists think about that? Or, hey, what are the traditional concerns? We're just simply not on the radar. Yes, we make a lot of noise here in America. We make a lot of noise online, and I think it does represent something real in the church. And I think it's not, it shouldn't be ignored. I think it represents more than they think. But at the same time, I just think especially because of their age, being mostly boomers, maybe older Gen X or something like that, it just isn't something they care about too much. And so I think they just don't know what to do with us. I think they don't understand us really. I mean, Francis definitely didn't understand us. He just believed the stereotypes. I think Leo is making an actual effort in meeting with Cardinal Burke, meeting with Bishop Schneider and some others. But my point of this is that even if Leo ends up being more positive, like Benedict, let's say, I think it's going to take time because it's just simply not a priority for the Vatican. I think we have to recognize that it's just not a priority. And so the truth is, Leo, I would say the way I would classify Leo is he's kind of a combination of Benedict and Francis. He's definitely not as good as Benedict, but he's nowhere near as bad as Francis. And I think if I had to say where he's on the spectrum, so if on this side is Leo and is Benedict, and on this side is Francis, I think he's more on the Francis side. I don't think it's like he's right in the middle. I think went the wrong way. He leans more towards the Francis side. Don't get me wrong. And I think though that the fact is he just hasn't done that much when it comes to traditionalists. He has not seen our concerns as something that is that important, which, disappoints me. I mean, obviously, I wish Pope Leo would elevate the concerns of traditionalists higher in his list of priorities. I mean, look at the consistory that was happening in January, where they punted on the issue of liturgy. Basically, if he really wanted that to be the discussion point, it would have been the discussion point. Now, they say they're going to do it in maybe back on the menu in June or something like that. But it's just like one of these things where it's like he's not attacking traditionalists like Francis did all the time, but he's also not praising them or really caring that much about them. And also, he's allowing traditional masses to be shut down. I mean, we saw it in Charlotte. We've seen it in Detroit. We've seen it in Knoxville here in America, where bishops have gone against traditional mass, and not a peep was said by the Vatican. They were not disciplined. They were not, to our knowledge, nothing happened from the Vatican. They were allowed to do this, which sends a message. That's not good. Also, we see that Leo is really emphasizing Vatican II. I mean, he's got a whole he has a whole catechesis he's doing now on the documents of Vatican II in his general audiences. And so clearly Vatican II is still a priority, just like it was for previous popes. I mean, all the popes, post-Vatican II popes have been, Vatican II is the most important thing. It is the council of councils. Every single one of them, Leo, from Pope Paul VI to Leo, there's no question the most important council is Vatican II. Even Ratzinger, Pope Benedict, who at least acknowledged more previous councils a little bit more, he even thought that. So, and now, of course, we have this whole situation with the SSPX. What's Leo going to do with that? Well, I think, honestly, the biggest problem there is who's his point man? Under John Paul II, Cardinal Ratzinger was the point man. Now it's Cardinal Fernandez. Now, I know it's because he's got the same position as Ratzinger had as head of the CDF or DDF, whatever it's called now. But Fernandez is a disaster. And the fact that we're now, what are we, 9 months in, 8 months in, something like that, and Fernandez is still in charge of doctrine in the church, I'll be honest, I'll say it's scandalous. It's not something that I'm very much a fan of. And him being the point man who deals with the SSPX is just a disaster waiting to happen. If Ratzinger was a problem back in the 80s And in the eyes of the society, I think he was. Then my goodness, Fernandez, what the heck? I mean, the guy doesn't really have a Catholic bone in his body, it seems like, at least the way he talks and the way he acts. And so I think this is a big moment. I will say I am not on board like pro SSPX. They need to consecrate these bishops. Who cares what the Vatican thinks or anything like that? I don't think that's not my position. In fact, I think the Vatican should just explicitly say you are allowed to consecrate the bishops, and that should really be the solution. But if they don't say that, which they likely won't, I don't have a strong opinion what I think the society should do. And they're not calling me to ask me what I think they should do anyway. My point of this is like I'm not strongly pro or anti SSPX in this situation. But I do think though that this is going to be a big moment. How they handle it. Like it's not just a matter of will they allow it or will they not allow it? And that's the only two options. There is a spectrum. There is a spectrum here of how the Leo Vatican will handle the SSPX in this situation. I think that matters. I do think there's an interesting that basically there was no communication hardly between the Vatican and the SSPX until they said we're going to consecrate bishops. And all of a sudden now we're going to have a meeting a week later or something like that. I think that's telling. And it kind of justifies the society doing what it did. It's like if you're not going to even answer our mail, we're going to have to take it up a notch. So again, that's going to be a big point. The thing is like I think there's no way you can say Leo is some pro-traditionalist pope. He's obviously not, but I don't think you can call him an anti-traditionalist pope either. I think it's more just a matter of, that's something low on the agenda of this pontificate. And so my own thoughts, though, when it comes to Leo, I've said this before, I'll say it again, is he's actually exactly what I expected of the next pope before he's even elected. When Francis died and they were talking about who the next pope would be, I didn't know who the person would be, but this is exactly what I expected. A thoroughly modern bishop who is very pro-Vatican II, who is going to basically be in line with Francis, but probably not as extreme as Francis. He won't have the awful personality of Francis. I said all this before he was elected. And I think Leo is exactly what I thought. So he and I also think he truly does want unity in the church. He would like to see traditionalists kind of reconciled and the society reconciled with the church, with the wider church. But because of this, because this is what I expected, this is also why I'm not doing the constant 24/7 freak out session like some people are doing. I saw where I'm not on X anymore, but I was doing a little research for this. I'm not on X much. I post some stuff, but I don't scroll anymore on X is probably the better way to put it. And I saw when I was doing some research for this podcast, getting prepared for it, was like people are freaking out because there was altar girls at a papal mass. I think it was the first time maybe this happened since he became pope. I was this like why was this news? I'm actually surprised it was this long. This is just the way altar girls, which I think are an abomination, and girls should never be on the altar or women or anything like that. I mean, that's my own personal opinion. But the fact is they're just the norm in the Catholic Church today, and the vast majority of Catholics think nothing about it. Yes, I know for us traditionalists, we don't like it, and we have lots of good reasons not to like it, and I think they're very strong reasons. At the same time, it's not like I just can't believe that Leo was like, "Oh, I wanna kinda tweak the traditionalist. I'm going to have altar girls." I just think it was like, well, there happened to be altar girls. Like, okay, I'm sure he's celebrated masses before with altar girls. Whereas I think Francis at times purposely tweaked traditionalists. He purposely wanted to annoy them and bug them. I don't think Leo does that. I think he just does what he does, like he's always done, like every Catholic bishop in the world practically does. And like literally, how many hands would it take? Probably one hand. You can count on one hand the number of bishops in the world who would balk at altar girls. And so the fact that the Pope doesn't either is not really a news story, not reason, in my opinion, a reason to freak out at all. Personally, I'm glad the heat's gone down. I'm glad that a lot of prominent traditionalists are not just banging the drum constantly. I just don't think it's healthy. I don't think We here's another one reason is because I think there's a negative consequence to constant criticism, and I came to realize that under Francis, and I think it's true here too. I also think that I think fewer Catholics, especially young Catholics, really care about the trad Vatican battles. They just don't care that much. I think they're very pro tradition. I think they love the traditional Latin Mass. They love traditional elements in Novus Ordo Mass, if that's what they go to. They're more and more attracted to and interested in traditional acts of piety, devotionals, spirituality, things like that. I think all that's true. I don't think they care that much, though, about the battles between traditionalists and the Vatican. And so I just think that if we just constantly are ratcheting up the heat and attacking the Pope and the Vatican, stuff like that, I don't think we're attracting very many people. I think a lot. I think a lot of Catholics, even Catholics who are friendly to us. I'm not talking about the progressive Catholics or the who cares Catholics, anything like that. I'm talking about the Catholics who are friendly to us. I think they will kind of turn away and say, this is not worth it. So personally, I just go back to my advice I always give is pray and fast for Pope Leo in particular, that he would be a good and holy Pope. Pray that he would recognize the importance of tradition and the importance of a lot of traditional acts of piety, traditional liturgy, things like that. But that's our main way we can do it. I'm not saying we never can criticize. Like I said, I have an article coming out later this week that criticizes Pope Leo. It's not about an issue that's really technically traditionalism or anything like that. But the point is, I'm not saying we never can criticize him. I'm simply saying turning down the heat was a good thing. It wasn't a conspiracy, but it was a good thing that it happened. So, okay, let me check out the live chat. Okay, Patriot Pooh Bear first. Congratulations, thank you. I appreciate you, by the way, being a regular member of the chat and coming on and making comments. Anna Kate the Great. Oh yes, Anna Kate the Great. I think you're still in Steubenville, from Steubenville. Eric, I love the new setup. Lighting looks good too. Thank you. I do appreciate that because I put a lot of work into it. I've had some struggles. I admit I do, guys. Crisis is not rolling in cash. So the idea that I'm part of some conspiracy, I wish, because then I could be rolling some cash. We do this on a relatively low budget. I don't have somebody here who is like managing this stuff. I have to figure it out on my own. And so the lighting in particular has been a challenge. And so this is actually the first time I've done this type of lighting. I think it's the best. I think I'm pretty happy with it. I'm probably going to stick with this unless I get really crazy and decide to change it again. Okay, G. Cummings, grading Pope Leo is a matter of how much we will overlook. Yeah, I mean, the question is, what is our responsibility to look? You say, how much will we will overlook? I've said that you should not have altar girls. He has altar girls. I'm not overlooking it. I'm simply acknowledging the reality of where we are as a church. So what's our responsibility? What are we supposed to look at? I mean, are we supposed to nitpick every single thing he does and say, okay, this was good, this was bad? I don't think so. Love the new studio look. Thank you. Oh, wow, I got 2 compliments. I appreciate that. AV Creations says that. Okay, Anthony, I I am treading. Anthony, you are treading. I mean, okay, it's time to come clean. Anthony's the head of trading. He founded it. We take our orders from him, and basically everything we do, it comes back to him. But to be honest, Anthony, I'm still waiting for my first payment. You keep saying it's coming. I haven't seen it yet. Okay, Andrea Colombo says trads represent about 0.001% of world Catholics. The percentage is a bit higher in the US, like 2%. Yeah, I think it is. It might be more than 2% in America as far as if you want to say Catholics, if you want to limit to Catholics who go to mass weekly, I think it's more than 2% in America, but it's still single digits. Don't get me wrong. If you want to limit it to everybody who says they're Catholic, then yeah, it's probably less than 1%. So yeah, we're just not. I think we have. I've said this before. I think the energy of the church really resides with the traditional movement. I think that's where the energy is coming from of like really kind of pushing forward. And so I think we're outsized our influence for good reason, but it's still, I think your average Catholic, especially Catholic bishop over 60, still considers us just like they did in the 90s. Like we're nobodies. Okay, Gracie O'Bunny says, it's kind of nice to not be attacked and hurt by the Pope, but Leo seems a little indifferent to trans. Yeah, you just summed it up right there. It is great, isn't it, not to be attacked by your Holy Father? I mean, none of us like that. And a lot of us, got angry. And I think we had legitimate reasons to be angry. At least Leo doesn't attack us, which is good. And I think that means something. I think he genuinely wants the best for us. He doesn't look at it. I don't think he looks at us as the enemy, but I don't think he cares. I don't think he doesn't look at us as that is more important than any other group and probably less important than a lot. A Borgerding. I'm sorry. Not sure that Rome doesn't care about traditionalists. Apparently, the SSPX is the third largest order in the church behind Augustinians and Jesuits. That might draw some attention given their stance. I don't know. I might disagree. I think I might disagree because, like the SSPX, I don't think they consider them really kind of in the church. Now, don't get all technical on me, people. I'm not saying they're in schism. I'm not even saying they're saying they're in schism. But as far as like who they manage, who they think about, like, okay, they have to worry about the Jesuits. They have to worry about the Augustinians. They don't actually have to worry that much about the SSPX because they don't actually kind of have oversight over them. Daniel says, dialogue, schmilogue. There's no dialogue. Well, that is probably true. Boy, we're having great comments today. I love this chat today. Market X says, I think he is as extreme as Francis, but not in a nasty way. And I get that. I get that. I don't agree. I do not agree. I think he is, first of all, he's not nasty. I agree with you on that. But I think that he is just his view of the church, his ecclesiology, his view of tradition, things like that, is nowhere near as extreme as Francis. I don't think it's as good as Benedict, or maybe not even as good as JP2, but it's not as extreme as Francis, I don't think. Pillar 6311 says, with Cardinal Fernandez still there, I don't know how Pope Leo can be looked upon favorably. It's not like Pope Leo is ignorant of his appointment. Yeah, I don't disagree with you in this. I mean, when you say looked upon favorably, is this like a yes, no question? I look at more like, okay, where does he lie on the spectrum? And frankly, keeping Cardinal Fernandez in office this long, I do think is problematic and kind of makes him push more towards the problem end of the spectrum. Like I didn't think he had to fire him the day one, but I did think after 6 months or so, he probably should have replaced most of Francis's appointments to these high offices, especially the Cardinal Fernandez, who's the worst. The worst. Okay, Palermo Trapani. I like all these names because they make me look foolish trying to pronounce them. Fernandez's tenure ends summer of 2028. That will be the chance to either reappoint or give him a diocese back in Argentina. Oh God, I hope it's not that long before he's out of office. Because remember, the Pope can remove him tomorrow if he wants to. He doesn't have to wait until his tenure ended. Maybe he will. Maybe he'll think there's reason to do that. I don't think he should, but maybe he will. But if he kept them even after that, yikes, that would definitely not be a good sign. Okay, I'm going to wrap it up there. Hey, I appreciate everybody jumping on the chat. We had a lively one today, and just those who join us on the live podcast on Tuesday afternoons. I really appreciate that. Also, thank you for the compliments people saw. So if you're listening to this and not watching, hey, maybe this is your sign that you should watch at some point. We're on YouTube, we're on Rumble, we're on Facebook, and we're on X. So YouTube and Rumble are probably the best too, because Facebook and X videos are kind of dumb usually. So, okay, bye everybody. That's it for now. Until next time, God love you and remember the poor.